Hello everyone, this is Dina. I have been asked by a couple of people to show how I grid my projects for cross stitch. I have watched several of the tutorials that are available out there, especially from Jennifer Appendaco and also Carolyn Mazio, and I've attempted to mirror them and copy their methods and have found that I'm not usually as precise as they are, and it has caused a bit of frustration on my part trying to get the gridding done perfectly. So I'm just going to give you a brief, not really a tutorial, just an explanation of how I grid and see if some of you may be doing the same thing or if some of you might want to try it. This is my fabric I'm going to be working with today. It is a beautiful piece of linen, and it's 28 count, and it's a lavender. I'm not sure if the color is going to come through very well there or not, but this is what I'm going to use to grid with. This is the Sulky Sliver Metallic Thread, and I'm doing it just for fun in the dark purple because I think that'll look pretty against my fabric, but I'll certainly be able to see that. I hope you can. And what I'm going to do is just tell you how I get started and show you a line or two of it as I'm going, but I'm not going to have you watch me grid this whole piece of fabric because it may take me most of the day to do it. I'll just show you how I do it, and I'll stop the filming, make some progress, and come back and update you on how it's going and give you some examples of tips. So the first tip I want to give you that I've learned the hard way is that this Sulky Sliver thread is extremely slick, and it will come out of your needle very, very quickly. So what I do is I go through the needle once, I go back around to the same side that I came through the first time, and I go through the needle a second time. Now what this does is form a little loop there, as you can see. Here's the loop, and then I just grab both ends and pull it. It doesn't make a knot, it just has a little bit of a loop around there. And believe it or not, that helps keep it in there a lot better. So we'll try there. Now, I'm going to be gridding this fabric based on a pattern, which of course I can't show you the pattern, but I'll show you the picture I'm going to be starting. And this is Bewitching. I really prefer when a pattern has a grid where the center line is actually one of the grid lines. Unfortunately, this is not the case. In this pattern, the center line is exactly one stitch off the grid line. Now, the only reason that I don't just say, oh, that's so close, I'm going to make that my center line, is that the whole purpose of this gridding is to completely be able to match what's in one square of your pattern, one 10 by 10 block, to match that exactly on your fabric in a 10 by 10 block. So if I changed my center to be one of the grid lines, my blocks would be all off by one. I don't want to remember all that. So I will go ahead and grid it exactly as the pattern is started. So I'm going to stop the camera now, and I'm going to find the very center of my fabric. Well, since I don't have much room on the edge, I'm going to grid the first couple of lines probably from the edge. Then once I get my grid going in the opposite direction, I'll have a better idea. Now, to get started, I find these knots in this thread to be extremely small. So I've gone over a couple of threads with my needle and come back up, and I'm just tying a little knot here after I've got my silky sliver thread through a couple of threads of the fabric. So that way I have a secure end, and I tie 3. I've just always felt like that holds it a little bit tighter than the 2. Of course, because I'm doing this on camera, I'm having to look through the camera to secure it, so it is a little bit awkward. Okay, now we're ready to get started. Okay, now what I'm going to do to get started is I've selected my line that I'm going to be going up. And you'll see I'm going to go up this same line of thread all the way to the top. So all I'm worried about right now is staying in this particular row so that I don't go one stitch over to the left or the right. I need it to be perfectly straight. And that is all my gridding worries about. And then I count 10 spaces over, and I go up that row again, and I make sure I'm exactly in the same row. And to double check, when I get about halfway up, I count to make sure I'm still 10 spaces, or in this case with linen, it's 20 threads. I still count over 2 like I stitch, because that's what my eyes are used to seeing. And then I go to the top and I count again to make sure I'm even. That way, if I count in the middle and the top, I know that if I am off 1 thread, either way, that I only have to take it out probably to the middle. It's surprising how easy it is to find where you go off once you go back and look for it in that row. But if you check the middle and the end of each row, then you won't be off, and you'll have exactly 10 stitches in your grid, just like the pattern will. So I'm going to cut the camera off now, and I'm going to grid a little bit, and then I'll come back and let you see my progress. Okay, now I've done the first row. So I've gridded from one end to the other. I'll flip my fabric around so I can deal with this end very carefully. And then I'm going to count over 10 and start back up. Whoops, sorry, I hit the camera. Okay. Now, let me see if I can do this. This is very difficult to do when you're trying to look through a camera that doesn't have a magnifying lens on it, because that's how I'm used to dealing with this. So I'm going to go back down here so that when I come up, I'm going to come up my 10 spaces over. Or you can go down the 10 spaces. So let's just do it where you can see it. Okay, so I'm going to count over my 10 spaces. Or as you know, 20 threads. Okay, I've counted over to go down 10. Now, I like to double check. So let's double check here. Ten, exactly. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is come back up only probably what you would consider 1 stitch here. Make sure you're in that row. Gotta be in that row. That's how you get started. Get a little knot out. Okay. And now we're going to start back up. So I'm going to show you this one row on how I do it. So I take my needle as a guide, And I just run up that row for a little ways, and I go down with my needle. And again, I apologize for the awkwardness since I'm trying to do this looking through a camera. And I try to come back after just 2 threads. Sometimes it may be 3. I'm not worried about that. I'm just worried about staying in that line that I'm marking. The same line of thread, you know, that I'm going up, or the, whatever you want to call it, the ditch or the thread that you're following. That's what's important to me. So I generally pull my thread, my silky sliver, back so I can see the hole it's coming out of. That's important to me because I want to follow that up again and go back down again. And then come back up. Okay, and then we're going to go back down again and follow that line up. The speed for me comes with not having to count exactly 8 stitches, you know, leave a gap of 2 underneath and then count again. That is a wonderful process, and it gives you, once you get the grid going, when you go the opposite direction, you just go through the openings. You know there's 2 threads there, you split the difference and you go right up the middle. I must confess though, mine never came out perfect. They were never all exactly perfect. And so I had a problem. They were off. And that meant I had to go back. I have had, when I was first gridding, trying to do it the way Jennifer taught, because I thought it was just so appealing to be that beautifully organized, I'd have to take out half the grid because I wouldn't know I was off until I started going in the opposite direction, and I'd catch it. You know, my 2 open spaces weren't lining up together. And so I was in a quandary then as to what to do. Then I'd have to go find where I went off, and I try not to get just 1 thread. On occasion I do, but I think that's a little bit of stress on your fabric when it's just 1 thread holding it. Okay. We're not quite halfway there. So let me make a couple more, and then I'll count again, just to make sure I'm still 20 threads or 10 stitches if I'm doing, because I'm going to be doing this 2 over 2. Okay. Sorry to be moving it around on you. I have to kind of see how far I've come. Okay, for sake of just seeing how this works, let's go ahead here and let's count to make sure we're still at 10. So we're going to start from the thread over here. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm right where I need to be. So I feel like I've done my little check for the center, and I'm still on track, which is what I want to make sure I'm still on track, and I can keep going. So I'll slide up that little line again and go to the top, and then I'll I'll check at the top again. So for purposes of just a demonstration, I'll pause the camera here and I'll get to the top and we'll check it again. I won't make you watch me go the whole way, just for the sake of time, and then I'll come back to you. Okay, I've gotten to the end. I've checked and I have exactly 10 of the 2/2 stitches, and I've gone under the fabric this time, as you can see there, and I've counted 10 and come up, and then I've double counted 10 to make sure I came up in the right hole, and I've turned my fabric to go back long ways because I just see it going better this way, and I've got enough silky sliver thread to do one more row. You don't want to stop your thread in the middle of a row. You want to go to the end and tie a knot. So I will do that, and then I will be back. Okay, I'm at the end of that row, and I don't think I have enough thread here that I want to worry about starting another row at all. It's just not enough. So I'm gonna secure this with a knot, and then I'll get another piece of thread. Now, what I think I'd like to do is just to say, I've checked this repeatedly through here to make sure that my first line and second and third that I'm building off of are perfectly 10 apart, and they are. I've checked them even more than once, middle and top, because the first line you don't have anything to compare it to, so you want to make sure that your second line comes off exactly right. Otherwise, you may be off in the first line. Anyway, this is how I get started, and I'm going to continue gridding, and when I turn to go the other way, I'll come back and show you. Thanks. Bye. I'll give you another tip of what I do when I'm turning to go to the next row, and I have to go under for 10. It's harder for me to count those 20 threads or those 10 by counting, you know, the over 2. So what I've done here, I do quite frequently, I count under the first 5 and come up and then check to make sure I've counted 5 correctly. And then it's easier for me to count using my needle walking across on the top. So I'll do that, and then I'll go down here for 10. Then, as I start that row, the first stitch I make for this row or column, I count again. But this way, it just makes it go a little quicker for me. Okay, here's the fabric that's gridded all in one direction, all the columns all the way across. So now I'm ready to turn it this way and grid this way. So I will get started on that, and then I'll come back and show you what I'm doing. Okay, we are ready to start the other direction now, and I have started my thread, my silky sliver this way, and I'm just gonna go down and come up to start the line here so that I can intersect those stitches that I have across the way there. So we're going to just go up this line again, just like we did before, just till I'm at a point where I want to dip in and catch a couple of threads. And you can make it wherever you want it to be. It doesn't really matter. I just kind of go a distance and pop under. Try to get that where you can see it. Keep going up this line. This is a little bit of a shorter distance. I'll try to make my silky sliver long enough that I can go 2 or 3 of these without having to tie off and change again, simply because that helps me save a little time. Now remember, this first row, you don't have anything to count. So you're just trying to be as consistent as you go. I'm just trying to check it as I go to make sure it's the same place that I'm putting my needle in. Then when I do my next row, I will check it quite frequently to make sure that I'm in the 10 and 10 and 10, so that everywhere between those two threads will be 10 spaces. Now this is where I differ from the more neater versions. I'm not worried about how many spaces I'm putting my thread across or under, as long as I am the 10 crosses apart. And of course, when I say 10, this is linen, I am counting over 2. And I'm just saying there's 10, but it's really 20 threads. Hope you understand that. I probably haven't been very clear about that, but I look at it as over 2, so I count it as 10. I'm just doing this whole one up here so you can kind of get a flavor of the amount of time this takes. It's not quick. It's not, something you can do in just a few minutes. It does take a little while, but the amount of frogging that this has prevented for me has been well worth it. And I was not a gritter. I started gritting after seeing it on FlossTube. Okay, now I'm going to get to the end here. I'm going to turn around, and then I will head back down, and I will check frequently to make sure that I'm 10 apart, and that way I can make sure that I didn't get off track in this middle line. Okay, I'll join you again later. Okay, I've made it to the end of this row. Now we need to double check again. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're right on it. So now all I'm going to do, let's see, my thread is actually under. I use my needle point to count. So now I have to count 10 this way and start down again. Counting under is much harder for me, so bear with me as I go here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so we'll check it again. 10. Okay, now we're ready to spin it around. I just prefer to go this direction. You don't have to spin it if you don't want to. It just goes a little bit better for me when I do that. And we start back this way again. And going back over another line is a little bit easier because you can actually get into a pattern of going all the way to that line with your thread and just dipping under it to make it an easy guide if you want to for when to put your thread under. As I said, I don't necessarily make them uniform, but if you want to do them this way, you'll at least be doing about half of Jennifer's method, and it'll probably look pretty good to you. But I'll stop here and show you a little bit about what I wanted to show you on the grid. So now we've got enough of the rows here that you can see these grids are emerging, and they are 10 by 10 in every direction, and the thread itself doesn't necessarily go up or come down in exactly the same spot as you see here. This one's right here, but your eyes will automatically fill that in, and you will be able to count your spaces either way without any trouble. I don't even notice where the gaps are. But this to me helps me to move it along a little faster and finish the gridding a little bit quicker than I did. So I am timing myself today, and when I finish, I'll come back and show it to you, and I will tell you how long it took me. As you can tell, I'm start in the middle again, and I will work my way down one side, and then I'll go back to the middle, and I'll work my way out on the other side. And I do that just so I can make sure I have enough of these lines on either side of the middle grid line so that my pattern is going to match up to the one that I'm looking at. I'll be back when I'm done. Okay, it's finished. All the gridding is now done. Okay, goes this way. Gonna cut this little strand off right here. Finishing piece. There were just a couple of things I wanted to mention to you at the end of this sample of how I grid the fabric. One of the things I wanted to mention is that this is a form of linen, and there were some pretty big slugs in here. I have a couple right here if I can get it close enough to the camera. I could point it out to you, but I'm not sure if you can see it or not. But they are right here and right here. So just a comment on that, if you have a slug in your linen, you have to just be careful that as you get past it, that you pick up on the right thread to travel on up. It's really easy to get off if you get there. The other thing I want to mention is that this grid is a perfect square. So if you can see it, pardon me as I move you back here a little bit, sorry. It's not a perfect square, I didn't mean to say that. It is a 10 by 10 perfect block of 10 all the way across. In your pattern that you are working on, and I can show this to you on a piece that I've been working on, my beach babies. Sorry for the noise there. I'll show this to you here. Notice right here on the edge of the beach babies, there's my grid line. That little copper line is the grid line. And notice that the picture does not go all the way into that set of 10. So when you're gridding, be careful if you want to start in the corner, because a lot of you like to start in your corners. Be sure and look at how many spaces are not utilized in that first block of 10. There are two things I can recommend that you consider doing. One is that on that end you only put the number of squares that you need if that's confusing for you, or you start on the outside here where I could have started on this side and it wouldn't have mattered how far I went over here. It wouldn't matter if it wasn't a perfect 10. But I just remembered when I started in the corner, I checked to make sure where my first stitches started in that block of 10. So not only did the top start a little below, but this side did too. So you just have to remember that as you're going. Here's a piece that has been gridded and is being stitched. And the beautiful part about that, and here I've already undone a little bit of the gridding because I had to get it out of my way to see some of the lighter thread. But it works great. You can work in square by square. You can cross country. It just gives you a lot of options on what you're going to do as you're stitching. So I have been asked by a couple of people to share with you the way that I grid, since it isn't quite as exact as some of the other tutorials that you've had. So this gives you an indication of how I grid. The total time for gridding this entire piece today includes trying to set up for filming. Let me calculate that for us. Okay, so this took me a total of 4 hours and 15 minutes to grid. That included the time that it took for me to set up my little camera here. That part didn't take too much time, but then to stop and talk about what I was doing and try to remember to tell you the various pointers that I wanted to share with you, and to talk a little bit did possibly slow me down, but not much, probably about at the most that 15 minutes. So I would say that this piece of linen here, and this is for a fairly large piece that's going to be 146 by 204 stitches, or on 28 count is going to turn out to be about a 10.5 by 14.5 picture. So it's going to fill up this entire grid. This is a fairly large piece, but it took me 4 hours to do from start to finish. So it's not a negligible thing that you might want to try. It's certainly an investment of time. But it has saved me so much time frogging because I catch my errors so much more quickly. And when I'm wanting to stitch other parts on a piece to either use up my floss or to make sure that I'm going to bring those two parts of that picture together at the right spot, and I want something to travel over and then work from there, this grid matching up to the pattern gives me the perfect way to check my placement of everything I'm working on. So I have really become a gridder. I really like it, especially on my linen, especially for larger pieces. So I hope this helps. Again, this is the thread that I use, Sulky Sliver Metallic. You can find it at Joann's. I have it in a variety of colors, and I do find that for darker fabrics, it's better not to get the clear or the silver because it reflects so much. Stitch in May, and I talked about that, and we were at the Joann's when she picked out her turquoise metallic, and it has worked beautifully on her black fabrics. So if you want something for black, I recommend the turquoise. But otherwise, just get a dark enough color that can be seen well on your fabric and start gridding. I hope you find this helpful, and I hope you've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed sharing it with you, and I got my fabric gridded today. Thanks. You guys have a great afternoon. Happy stitching.